Welcome back to Proof or Potion, the health and wellness podcast where we break down holistic health research to figure out whether a trendy hack, herb, or lifestyle tool actually has scientific proof behind it, or if it's just another feel-good potion with a sprinkle of wishful thinking. So today we're talking about something super relatable, and that is what time of the day you eat your food and how that very timing can impact your body weight. So the study we're breaking down today is called Distribution of Energy Intake Across the Day and Weight Loss, a systemic review and meta-analysis. It was led by Isabel Young and her team from the University of Sydney in Australia, along with researchers from both Scotland and Israel. They published it in the Journal of Obesity Reviews back in 2023.
So long ago. This is another interesting study to piggyback off of the weighted vest study we reviewed last week. But this one is all about chrononutrition. What's that you say?
What is that?
Chrononutrition is basically the science of meal timing and how it lines up with your body's internal clock, which is commonly known as our circadian rhythm. Think of it like your internal timer that says when to wake up, when to feel hungry, or when to burn energy. So this study is looking at whether or not when we eat has any impact on these natural rhythms in our body.
Exactly. One of the reasons why I found this study super interesting is because of the intermittent fasting craze, right? We see this both, I see it all over my social media, and it's something I commonly see in my patients when I do intakes at the clinic. And while intermittent fasting has its benefits, which we're not going into that here, I often see intermittent fasters refraining from calorie intake until late in the day and then eating the bulk of their calories in the evening.
Yes, this is so common. Now, for the sake of conversation, intermittent fasting can be done during whatever hours of the day works for you. I understand scheduling is hard, work, things like that. But we definitely see most people restricting calories in the morning and then enjoying an eating window that is later in the day, sometimes right before bed or an hour before bed. But based on this study, what if we found out that eating the bulk of our calories in the morning was actually better for our bodies and could lead to better health outcomes and weight loss?
I want to know. Okay, so a little history. This study is a meta-analysis and a systemic review. So just a reminder for those of you that stick with us, this is when researchers look at a whole bunch of different studies on the same topic, and then they combine that data to see if the results had any variations. They run some fancy statistical models, and they come up with a generalized result.
So the researchers in this study were pretty picky about which studies made the cut for the meta-analysis, and they used only randomized controlled trials. They also wanted study participants to only include adults over 18 and compare two ways of spreading out daily calories, more in the morning and early afternoon versus more in the evening. All groups were also required to be on the diets prescribed by the researchers that put participants into a caloric deficit. So, in other words, weight loss was always the goal with less calories, and the mission was to determine if early calories or late calories were more supportive of weight loss in general.
Totally. In the end, they analyzed the data from 9 randomized controlled trials with about 485 total participants. Those participants were mostly women, and they were an average age of around 40, and they had starting BMIs in the overweight range. Exactly how calories were divided throughout the day varied from trial to trial, but the goal stayed the same. We wanted early eaters skewed to have calorie consumption towards the morning and midday, and we wanted late eaters to have it flipped so that they were eating more calories during their evening meal.
Now, the juicy results.
Drum roll.
Early eaters lost more weight, roughly 2.7 pounds compared to late eaters. That's modest, but significant.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the studies went one step further and looked at health markers such as LDL cholesterol, fasting blood sugar, and insulin sensitivity. They found that eating the majority of calories in the morning actually had benefits on these values as well, including drops in LDL cholesterol, fasting blood sugar, and insulin resistance. Some studies even found that participants reported less hunger better sleep regularity, and even a reduction in diabetes medications for early eaters.
Wow. That's so cool that just eating at a different time of day can have that sort of results, right? Like impacts on your overall health. I had no idea. And I have to say for myself that I often eat or I like wait a long time to eat in the morning simply because I'm not hungry, right? So, but this totally makes me think twice about that. Um, and just to wrap up our thoughts on the study here, is a word of warning. So before I take this data and run with it, I will share that the studies that we were evaluated were pretty short term. So they only ran between like 9 to 15 weeks. So we definitely need some more long-term data to say that these results are truly definitive. Also, as shared by the researchers of this paper, there was high variability amongst the trials for how calories were divided, meaning that there wasn't a real definitive percentage of calories to be consumed in the morning versus the night.
Interesting results. Of course, the pro of this method is that it's free, relatively easy for people to implement, but there are definitely some shortcomings, and I am skeptical about the actual evidence, at least from this study, that there is a connection between our circadian rhythm and nutrition timing. There is also the question of how does meal timing impact normal day-to-day health, especially when individuals are not trying to lose weight. I would have liked to have seen more objective data, such as the things that you might see on a normal blood panel. It's a cool concept, but I feel like this is sort of the tip of the iceberg for this topic.
There's definitely some things that could have been improved upon or expanded, but let's circle back to the researchers' original question, right? Could timing our nutrient intake to be earlier in the day support weight loss? So, this is where we ask our big question. Do we feel like this is proof or potion? I kind of don't know on this one.
I mean, it was such a small decrease, or at least in the primary outcomes. So that weight loss, it was how many pounds?
2.7 pounds
compared
more
to,
than those that ate the bulk of their calories at night.
yeah, but it was also short term, right?
9 to 15 weeks. That's
Yeah, a few months. I mean, they say like
2 to
decent weight loss is like a pound a week.
yeah.
If you're on like a normal routine, so it could be 4 pounds a month. So yeah, I guess, they're a little, it's not like alone, maybe a significant difference. But I thought the blood marker part was cool. How it kind of made some minor changes in insulin resistance. And you can only imagine that long term,
Yeah.
also that would be beneficial. Also, our last study, we were talking about resting metabolic rate and caloric restriction.
Mhm.
Did they talk about how much the caloric restriction was, or it was different with all the
It
studies?
was different
right?
with all the studies. Yep. Everybody was aimed at weight loss, but there was no real consistency. And this is where this study almost like starts to fall apart a little bit because there was no super consistency on how like aggressive the weight loss was in each study in terms of caloric restriction. And there was really no consistent timing. It said like some people ate 30% of their calories in the morning and that was considered skewed to the morning.
Okay.
Some people ate 50% of their calories in the morning and that was considered skewed to the morning. So it was a little bit spotty.
Yeah, we're not sure what the timing was either. If it was you woke up at 5 and then you ate 9, it was still the
Immediately,
morning,
right.
and then you're going to bed at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., whatever.
Yeah.
So timing is a big variable in terms of your circadian rhythm. Even when we think about things like hormones, when we wake up and a cortisol spike and the way that's interacting with our blood glucose. And I know personally, I've read about this topic of chronobiology and what's the chrononutrition
Is what they're saying.
is what we were talking about. Yeah, chrononutrition and just chronobiology in general, and how everything in our body does work on a circadian rhythm and a timing, and how does chrononutrition impact our chronobiology and that sort of thing. How do they interact together? And I read a little bit about how in the morning, when you're eating carbs specifically, that they go into your stores to be used for the day, into your glucose stores, so that then you can go and be active and have readily available glucose. But if you're having, say, a huge, sugar load at night, then it just gets turned into fat because you're not using it. And I think a lot of people if you're not eating at all in the morning, you don't have those immediate reserves, you're getting that cortisol spike, which is telling your body to pull out some of that sugar to use it as fuel. But if you don't have that, then it's, you know, yes, you could be like pulling from fat theoretically, but it's less efficient. The processing, you know, isn't like if you don't have any fuel, then it might not be as efficient to go and, you know, use energy throughout the day. And then, of course, most of us, if we go to just a job, say we're not exercising, we just go and sit at a computer all day, you know, maybe get up, move around a little bit. But then at night, we're sitting down, we're watching TV, we're eating dinner, and we're eating often a big meal, especially if you're not someone who's hungry for breakfast or lunch, which I hear all the time, especially with women. I hear it all the time. Oh, well, I'm just not hungry, but I do a good job with fasting because I skip breakfast and lunch.
It's easy because I don't even think about it.
Yeah, but you're often still full from the night before because you ate so much so late, and then your body is trying to figure out what to do with that, and or you're under eating because you're only eating that one big meal for dinner, and then your body's processing that a certain way. So I think there's so much here, and I do think intuitively, and from the other research that I've seen, that it is smarter to eat in the morning and to make sure you're stopping at least a couple hours before bed. Nobody likes to go to bed hungry, and you know, it's okay to have some carbohydrates because it can actually kind of blunt that cortisol spike at night and say, hey, we don't need cortisol to pull more sugar out to, you know, like we can actually, we have that available. We can just go to sleep. We have enough. It's good. And so it's not necessarily problematic to eat some carbs and to eat within, you know, enough time that you're not going to bed super hungry. But with that whole, the way most people do it, I don't think the pattern is too often to our benefit.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, my skin in the game on this one is a personal story, which gosh, it kind of always is, I guess. But I know that I feel better, and you were kind of sharing this too earlier. Like I feel better when I eat earlier in the day and when I stop eating several hours before going to bed. And I've noticed just the symptom of bloating. I have really bad bloating if I'm eating late at night. And so and that's like the most noticeable of the symptoms that I experience when I do that. So when I eat my early bird special at, 4 p.m., I feel great when I go to bed at 9. So
yeah, I even feel good if I eat at 6 or 7. But if I'm hitting that 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and it's a couple, there's something about that evening time that just doesn't feel as good.
So yeah, that's to lean on your like intuitively that feels accurate to me just from what I've experienced in my own body. It's kind of nice to have a little bit of research to back it up. I do think it's interesting. They did note, which I didn't mention earlier, was that one of the studies that was in the meta-analysis had actually done some macronutrient changes. And I wonder, and so macronutrient changes would be a focus on protein, carbohydrates, and fat, right? Like really working to balance those in a diet.
And sometimes fiber. And sometimes who considers fiber.
Right. And a macronutrient or not, right? And so I'm curious if macronutrient plus the timing is even more what you were saying earlier about eating carbohydrates in the morning versus protein. Basically how I feel about this, I'm not sure if this is proof or potion. I feel like a little down the middle on this one.
To get back to her.
But it's got me asking so many more questions. So here's the cool thing. Sometimes when a research paper doesn't give you an answer that you feel satisfied with, it can spawn new questions that can lead you to the next research article that is going to answer more questions for you. And that's how I feel about this one.
And let's be real, dieting and weight loss is probably one of the most challenging topics in the world to research in general, in large part of what you said, because of what you said about the specific diet. And patients, a lot of them are recall based. They don't have someone monitoring everything they eat all day, or if they do, they're having some weird nutritional plan, or they're eating processed food, or they're eating something abnormal that's not their norm, or they're reporting something different because they want to be more compliant. Like human memory is not super reliable, and a lot of them are just report based on what they're eating and when they're eating or how many calories they're eating. And so all of this tends to kind of surround the diet and weight loss research in general. And so you do have to be just very skeptical about anything food related, whether it's calorie restriction, whether it's the type of what's going into the food, that's the timing of day, it's the any of these things, especially if they're reliant on patient reporting. We just have to be a little bit skeptical and say, we don't really know. But in our experience and from the hints from this study, I would like to say that there's hints of proof that this may be a good idea in terms of, weight loss and, try it out. Let us know.
What do you guys think? Do you think there's
if it's
proof in
good
this?
for you, if your doctor approves all of the things, not because I said so, but, consider, working with your meal timing and let us know how that works for you.
All right, friends, that's all we got for you tonight. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Stay tuned for next time.